The Medical Courier Connection Podcast is brought to you by Key Software Systems. We believe that every delivery has a story, and it starts with you. That's why we built an ecosystem uniting accounting, delivery, tracking and shipping, reporting, and more to not only bring full delivery transparency to your customers, but to reduce errors and inefficiencies that stand in the way of over-delivering on your customer expectations. We'll drive the heavy lifting that keeps your business innovative with the latest technology so that you can focus on building connections with your customers. This podcast is also brought to you by Risk Strategies. Risk Strategies was founded in 1997 on the premise that an insurance brokerage could be more, a trusted risk management advisor and partner where a focus on employee and client needs would create value and success. Discover the difference of our specialist approach. We're here to help you see the way forward in a complex world with specialty insight, practical advice, and custom insurance with a vast network of specialists in property and casualty, employee benefits, private client, as well as consulting services and financial and wealth management solutions.
Hey everybody, hey everybody, hey everybody, hey everybody, Ken with Integrity, Ken with Integrity, Ken with Integrity, Ken with Integrity Medical Courier Training.
We are providing on-site training in Roseville, Minnesota.
A man's digits turn blue due to too much cannabis use. A woman in Melbourne, Australia dies after being scratched by Minty, her cat. Stole the hearse and dumped the body on the side of the road, still strapped to the gurney, and then continued on with their joyride. A dog had to be put down after it was crushed by a package thrown over a garden fence, its owners claim. So, stay compliant, my friends. Get all your medical courier training needs from us at www.integritydelivers.com.
And welcome back to the Medical Courier Connection Podcast.
All right. Yeah, I love that open. I giggle every time I see it because those differing hairstyles clearly show a man in crisis, and it's just something different every couple of weeks. But I'm really excited, you guys. We've done what, 25 of these podcasts now, Chris? How many do we have up?
This is number 30.
This is number 30. So We've done podcasts with industry experts, insurance, HIPAA, nuclear medicine, but we have yet to have someone from the clinical lab industry. And today is such a day, and we're really excited about it. I met Tim Leggett on LinkedIn, which is great. I've made some great connections on LinkedIn over the years, and he's got a vast experience in the lab industry. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. You know what? First things first, I do want to go over a disclaimer. This podcast is in no way inferred or otherwise to be seen as an endorsement of or by Quest Diagnostics or their affiliates. While our host and guests are both former employees of Quest, this conversation is really about our experiences in the lab industry and how medical couriers impact that industry. So get that legal disclaimer out of the way. And I want to read a little bit about Tim's bio. Here we go. Tim was born in Riverside, California, and graduated high school in Vallejo, California. He served in the U.S. Navy on active duty and reserve for 6 years. While serving in the Navy, he received certifications for Dental A School as dental technician and C School as a field service medical technician. He received a license as an emergency medical tech for the state of California. Tim relocated to Dallas, Texas, where he started his career in the reference lab business in 1987. He began as a lab courier transporting diagnostic specimens for International Clinical Laboratories, ICL. While at ICL, he served as purchasing and facilities manager. ICL was acquired by SmithKline Beecham, SPCL, and he continued working as a purchasing and facilities manager. There's the logo. I love it. When SPCL was acquired by Quest Diagnostics, he was serving as a logistics supervisor. He continued as a logistics supervisor and then logistics manager, and then as the first logistics director for Logistics Quest's Southwest Division. Upon his retirement in 2023, he was serving as logistics manager at Quest Diagnostics. Please welcome Tim Leggett.
Yeah, it sounds pretty nice when you read it out loud, but it was a great experience living through it. But thanks for the opportunity to be here. It's always interesting and fun to talk lab logistics.
Absolutely. It's a passion of mine. A little bit about my background for perspective, because it's not quite as illustrious as yours. My wife, back in 1980, I was fresh out of high school. a position, a courier position opened out at Lufkin Laboratories in downtown Minneapolis, 11th and Grand Avenue. I think Chris has a picture of Lufkin, but I started working. There it is. Look at the cars. I started as a courier working for the lab, making $4.25 an hour, driving their company vehicles. I said that one time on a live stream, and someone confronted me and they said, there's no way you took a job for $4.25 an hour. If you Google the minimum wage in 1980, it was $3.85 an hour. So yes, I did work for $4.25 an hour driving a company car. And then eventually around 1986, I want to say, Lufkin was purchased by SmithKline Bioscience Labs. And then we moved out to the suburbs, and they, of course, they became SmithKline Beecham Clinical Labs. And along the way, I got promoted to the position of courier trainer. They sent me to our King of Prussia headquarters on the East Coast, and I spent a week in intensive training. And then I came back, and my job was to train the couriers on company policies and procedures upon hire and annually, OSHA and HIPAA regulations. That's how I got my start as a medical courier trainer. Now, to date, Integrity Medical Courier Training has trained almost 1,000. We're like at 982 hospitals, laboratories, and outsourced courier companies literally around the globe. We have a client in Canada, and in 2012, I flew to Singapore to train the nation's largest lab over there, a national healthcare group, Diagnostics. So now what we do is we train courier companies and independent contractors constantly. We have about 150 to 200 contractors that go through our automated course every day. We have the Medical Courier Connection with about 2,000 members that brings together offering trained and vetted couriers to the clinical lab industry. We have a lot of exciting things coming up. We're traveling to several conferences this year. So busy, 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 and busy is good.
Mhm.
So that's my background. Like I said, not quite as authoritative as yours, but we share that background at SmithKline. I used to love the culture there at that company. And the funny thing is, we thought that when you look at the color schemes between Quest and SmithKline at the time, we all thought SmithKline was going to purchase Quest. And boy, were we surprised, right?
Yeah.
And it happens. So, all right, here's what I want to do. We're gonna go over some questions about the logistics industry. I'll try and stay on task, but like I said before, I may stray off now and then. I'll try my best to behave. But first question I have for you, again, how did you get into the lab industry? I know you had we shared a little bit about your bio, but how specifically did you get into the lab industry?
Yeah, it was interesting. And, I think fate had a lot to do with it. I'm a firm believer in fate, and things happen in life happen for a reason.
Yeah.
So when I relocated to Dallas, I did a variety of odds and ends stuff. And back in the dinosaur days, I call them, you actually looked in a newspaper and found a job. So I looked in the Dallas Morning News looking for jobs, and I saw one that was looking for a purchasing clerk of some sort for a company I'd never heard of, ICL, International Clinical Labs. I had no idea what that was, and that was back in the day, where it's difficult to Google. There was no such thing as Google, so
right.
You didn't know what you didn't know, or you went to the library and tried to look them up. So I answered that ad thinking I was applying for a purchasing type position because I had some experience with that with a Japanese-owned company a short time before that. Okay. So I did interview for that position, and I did not get it, which turned out to be okay. So that's what I tell people. If you get turned down or rejected or whatever, you can't take it personal. Things happen for a reason, and you either get better prepared or you move on. So a few days later, after I did that interview, and I was notified that I was not selected as the candidate, I received a phone call from the logistics supervisor for the same company, ICL, and he asked me if I would be interested in being a courier. Of course, I had no idea what a courier was. I still didn't really know what a international clinical laboratory was, let alone a courier. So I said, sure. I was single back in those days and, needed a job, of course. So I said, sure, I'd be interested in talking about it. So I came into the lab and talked to him. He offered me a job on the spot. He was an old drill instructor from the Korean War, Mr. Chapman. he had a big bite, and a big growl, but he had a big heart. But he took the job very seriously, which is good. So he hired me, and that's how I got into the lab business and the courier logistics business specifically. Back then, they called them DSRs, distribution service representative.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Yeah, like I said earlier, my wife worked at the laboratory in chemistry, helping set up urine cultures. Back in the day, they would train you on the bench, and that's kind of what she did. And then she was also in billing and logistics. But I got my job by referral. I mean, she said, "Hey, they have an opening. Do you want to take it?" And the rest is history. It's crazy to think. And there's an old saying that says, your gift will make a way for you. I never imagined in 1980, when I got hired as a lab courier, that decades later I would be training hospitals, laboratories, and outsourced courier companies, on these principles, these best practices. But here we are, right? So I love it. Never, don't hate the journey. It is what it is. So all right. Over the years, thinking about your position when you started managing the courier services, because as a logistics manager, that would be a part of your job. How many courier companies did you use? How many outsourced couriers did you encounter? Different companies. Can you think of it off the top of your head?
Yeah, I would say probably at least over 100 down through the years. That's
Wow.
over a long period of time, because back in the day, especially, now there's a little bit different dynamic, which we can talk about if you'd like later. But back in the day, you had what I'm not disrespecting, but I'm going to say mom and pop operations,
Right.
small scale, and I don't mean that in a negative way at all, because they were committed and they always came through for you. But you had smaller operations, so to speak, and they were usually a man and his wife, or a man and his son, or someone like that, and women also, believe it or not. Back in the day, when it was still difficult for women to get involved in certain types of industry, there were several women-owned operations. So you had it very fragmented in particular geographies. Like one would be very good at airport recoveries. Another one would be very good about going, 200 miles away from the lab and getting it back the same night. Another one might be very good at stats. So you had a fragmented operation, which was okay at that time. It worked. Over the course of time, of course, for different reasons, that's become less and less feasible. But you grew, and either the companies you were working with grew with you, or they were not able to grow with you. So that's a big factor, especially in the lab business down through the years, as local operations and national companies through acquisitions or whatever, they were growing, and they needed partners that could grow with them, or they were already there. They didn't really need to grow. They had the resources and the bandwidth to go ahead and support whatever you needed. So that's a huge part of the reason why there were so many down through the years, the geography, what you needed them for. And so many of them started out as small operations and either grew with different customers as their different customer base grew, or they didn't. And they did, if they didn't grow or they weren't able to increase their bandwidth, usually they went away.
Boy, that's such an important point. That whole part about being able to scale, we talk to couriers all the time online, and they'll say, what are some of the most important things that I should think about when building my courier business? And I always tell people, first of all, you got to have good credit. You have to have savings. I mean, these are almost non-negotiable. When I started my first courier company, AlphaStat Courier Services, I was still an employee of the laboratory. And my our manager, our logistics manager, we'll call him Dick, that was his first name, Richard. He I saw all the struggles he had when courier companies would come through the door, and the courier companies that came through the door, they're just like, I'm a logistics company. We move everything and we'd like to handle your blood too. Well, wasn't very impressive. So I started AlphaStat Courier Services, and true story, the CSRs were loyal to the previous company, so they weren't willing to give us the work that was promised. So as I was easing my way out of the lab and going part-time and starting this courier company, we sat for weeks when the phone never rang. I had to cash in my 401k to float payroll for the first month. Those are things you have to be able to prepare for and deal with. Smaller, other people that didn't prepare might go out of business, but you have to prepare and think about, I'm a risk manager. I'm always thinking about the worst that can happen. There are millions of people right now clamoring to get into the courier industry without counting the cost. And so some make it to scale. Others, don't. I mean, the statistics of the percentage of people, of small businesses that go belly up in the first year. It's pretty high.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And now more so than ever, especially in the olden days, so to speak, courier companies are being vetted more and more by their Standard & Poor's rating, their ability to carry a certain amount of liability insurance.
Right.
They're being vetted very, very closely, and it's scrutinized and held to.
I mean, think about it. Also, I mean, your web presence. I mean, people talk about it all the time. If you're going to apply for a job, let's say a job as an executive, there are people whose main job is to scour your social media presence and see if there's anything that could be an embarrassment to the company. And so that has to be considered as well. Some people don't think about it. A lot of people that get into this industry have all sorts of crazy things going on, and sometimes it's a deal breaker. So they have to be concerned about that. Are there any of the companies that you've worked with over the years as a logistics manager, and you don't have to name names, but any that stood out to you better than others, and how what stood out to you that made them better than others?
Yeah, the single biggest standout point and factor is the hands-onness, especially if you're new to a relationship and you're getting to know each other. It's critical, but it doesn't matter if it's a new relationship or 5 years down the road and you're still in a relationship. The involvement of leadership, the communication, those type of companies, and there's a couple that come to mind down through the years that were not large, although they grew into somewhat national presence. They were started at very regional, local level, but they were engaged with the customer. They kept surprises at a minimum, and as you well know, and probably everyone knows, surprise is the 4-letter word in the lab courier business. Yeah. Nobody likes them. And they're very difficult to explain to your leadership, to your lab management leadership. They don't like surprises. We don't like surprises in logistics. So if you're dealing with a partner, even when things are not going quite right, the communication, proactiveness, what made them stand out was communication, proactiveness, and their ability to give you heads up. Status checks, things like that. That's the difference maker.
Absolutely. So you have a courier who's got a sensitive stat specimen on board in Dallas metro area, and there's an accident and traffic's not moving. They call their supervisor. The supervisor calls you. Now you know the status of that specimen. You know right where it is. And okay, let's just keep us posted. I mean, things happen. We understand there's accidents, things break down, there's traffic, there's weather. But again, the couriers that really rise to the top are those that are proactive, like you said, and call you before you have to call them. Where's our driver? What's going on? It's 2 hours. What's going on?
Yeah. If a customer has, I'll say this, if a customer has to pick up a phone, has to send an email, has to send a text, whatever the communication methodology is, if a customer has to do that to find out what's going on, you're screwed.
Yeah.
You're not a well-run organization. You're not a caring organization, and nothing good can come of that.
I recall a situation early on when I was starting my courier company, and one of my competitors in Minneapolis, their dispatcher went on a smoke break. So I sat there and watched our dispatcher in the logistics department call a stat to this company. And she sat there and she's like, the phone, it keeps ringing. It keeps ringing. She'd hang up, try again, hang up, try again. Probably 13 minutes went by as she's doing this. Finally, the guy answered the phone. And instead of saying, Acme Courier Services, he said, "What?" And I mean, our dispatcher is, you can see her face is red. She's not happy. And she's like, "We have a stat. Can you do it?" And he says, "It's no big deal. I'll get a driver on it." Well, that phrase was there. That was the beginning of the end for that company. It's no big deal. Yes, it is a big deal. There's a patient at the end of that stat waiting.
Yep.
And so, it's important that even if you have a courier company that does auto parts and title commitment deliveries, but also lab specimens, as long as they know how to prioritize the lab specimens, that's fine. But once they're, if you pair a 1 hour title closing document to a 1 hour lab stat and you can't prioritize the lab stat, we have a problem, because you know what? It's an inconvenience to wait at the closing office at the title company, but it's not going to harm, it wouldn't put somebody's life in danger.
Yeah. And as you said that, I was thinking that down through the years, there's been many logistics companies, 3PLs, saying they are 24/7. And if you say you are 24/7, you need to understand what that really means in the lab business. It doesn't mean, like your example, they're similar, that if I call someone at 2:00 in the morning, because the labs are 24/7 and actually the bulk of the activity in the lab business is happening probably between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. in the morning. Mm-hmm. If I call you and your version of 24/7 is me waking somebody up at 2:00 in the morning and they answer the phone saying, "Yeah," and they are supposed to be the dispatcher or the problem resolution person, that's not 24/7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, listen, I've been there. I'm smirking because when I owned Integrity Medical Couriers here in Colorado, we had a client, correctional healthcare. And what they did was they provided, when the police department picks someone up who's drunk on the street, they have to bring them to a drunk tank where they sleep it off, whatever. And by law, the county has to provide medications for that person. So during intake, you got to try and ascertain, are you on any medications? What are they? And then the county contacts a local pharmacy and the pharmacy fulfills the medications. The courier delivers it. Well, for quite a while there, even as the owner of the company, I was the one that answered the phone, and that thing would go off at 3 a.m. And yeah, there were times when I kind of stood up and spun in a circle trying to get my bearings, but there were also times that I slept in the parking lot of a local ER knowing the phone was going to ring again. You do what you have to provide a certain level of service, but I understand it, but that's just me. So what were some of your requirements as a logistics manager and director? What were some of the requirements? So let's say a courier company comes to you and says, we've got 5 couriers. We've been doing this for a while. We'd like to service your laboratory. What were some of the requirements that you would give them out of the gate?
Yeah, basically the 24/7-ness of it, or what are your hours of operation? Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't necessarily mandate someone had to be 24/7, but they had to be upfront and honest on stating what their hours of operation were, what their dispatching system was like, and what their geography covered was. That was critical, especially in the larger metro areas. What's your geography that you feel very solid in? There were also some other requirements as time went on, as far as insurance and liability, what's your coverage, signing contracts for performance triggers and measurements, things like that. Do you entirely use independent contractors, which was okay, but I just needed to know, or do you have employees? What part of your operation is employee based? What part of it is independent contractor? How do you do the training? Training, absolutely critical, because more and more so the transportation part of the lab business is being scrutinized with outside regulatory agencies like CAP, CMS, people like that. They're not only looking at the laboratories and the quality of testing, they are also now looking, and have for the last few years, looked at the transport. So the training I'd have to view their training, what they were training on, how frequently they were training, who did the training. Because as you probably know, many people know that the person that's the best at a particular task is not necessarily the person that needs to be training on that task.
Right.
Because that's not always a good fit. They can do the job better than anyone else, but can they show another person how to do the job?
Oh, yeah.
So training, always looked at training, always looked at the number of drivers they had, what geography they covered, were they willing to sign a contract with insurance coverage, understanding pricing, all in agreement on pricing, things of that nature. Basic in the contract courier stuff, as you know, basic stuff that you need to cover. This is not restaurant delivery service. This is not delivering a cold pizza. This is not going to Mickey D's and picking up an order that's in a sealed brown bag. This is healthcare.
Right.
And you need to get the sense that the people who are in healthcare understand that the transportation side of healthcare, although somewhat invisible, it's not going to make the nightly news during epidemics and things like COVID and 9/11, things like that. You're not going to hear typically about couriers, but anyone in the business understands how transportation is playing a vital role in all of this, and how more and more regulated we are on the transportation side.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about training, and of course that's a passion of mine. In our training course, we show drivers what a lab specimen looks like, and we talk about the history of how the packaging came into play. We talk about different, pathogens in the workplace, but we really focus on how these lab specimens impact patients, right? Understand that there's a process. So we have our circle of service that teaches, the patient goes to the clinic, has their specimen collected, the courier picks it up, brings it to the lab does their diagnostic work, and based on the results of the test, the doctor prescribes treatment. It's so important that every courier that's going to deliver one of these understands the process and the possible impact on patient care. And so we're visual. All of our training shows them what it looks like, and they have to understand the proper coolers and packaging and all of that. Mm-hmm. Really, really important, because you know what? I'm sure, as you've known, you could spot an untrained courier service a mile away, because it becomes obvious pretty quickly. When couriers walk out of their car into the accessioning area or specimen processing with a handful of specimen bags, that's not a good look. It doesn't ensure confidence. Right away, you start to wonder, are they using coolers throughout the whole process? Did these specimens, endure the whole ride on their car seat? I mean, what are we talking here? And that's really, really important that they understand that. The importance of using the proper cooler. When I was at SmithKline, there was a courier at the Van Nuys business unit, and statute of limitations has obviously run out, but he had a shoulder bag that they had given him, but he believed that the volume of specimens that they get out of this hospital, not that big of a deal. I'll just go in without the cooler. As he was walking out of the hospital down the sidewalk with a handful of specimen baggies, OSHA was coming in for an inspection. Guess what? They didn't like it. He was fired, and the lab was fined. And so people have to understand that these regulatory agencies are on site often, if not for the reasons for the patient, and that's number one, you have to understand that there's a reason for this, and there are consequences to not doing it the right way.
Yeah, you mentioning that, down through the years, we've had many surprise inspections. The FAA is one that you wouldn't normally expect in the lab business. The FFA came in one time. They've been in more than once in my career, but they come in, and a good inspector, nothing hardly misses their eye. And someone carrying in a specimen without a container, an outer container, a cooler, or a tote bag of some sort is a dead giveaway. And that once an inspector smells blood, literally, no pun intended, all deals are off, because they're going to be in there a while. And if FAA inspector shows up, it's because they've already been at the airport at American Airlines or United, or they're going to come in with a copy of an air bill that they've already received from the airline. So if they come on site to your property for a reason, for an unexpected and unannounced inspection, and they start noticing things right off the bat, like you talk about, it's only going to go downhill from there.
Wow.
Because they're going to be there a while looking at training records and things of that nature. If they notice any little discrepancy, like security of the facility, how do the couriers get in? Who would think about that? You want to make it as easy as possible for them to come in, but on the other hand, you make it too easy, then of course in this day and age especially, you don't want there to be any security issues arising. So visual observations can mean a lot and can make a difference for sure.
Absolutely. I got an emergency request just before Christmas this year to go out to Omaha, Nebraska for a courier company out there. And it was a new account for them, and they wanted to see how their drivers were doing their job. I have a 3-page document that I've created that has a series of points that I'm looking for. I'm a different set of eyes. I mean, if they have a regional manager that's there, he doesn't see what I see. And 3 out of the 5 drivers that I rode with were stuffing all the specimens into one container in and out of the facility, room temp, frozen, refrigerated. That was a problem. Some of their coolers were ripped up. Many of them had no markings. 3 out of the 5 drivers left their car running at every stop. And they might have locked their vehicle, but it was running at every stop. And we had a guy that had an outside job as a painter. His main job was a painter, but he knew his route. He's the only one that knew the route. He was very proud of that fact. But he came to work that day in sweatpants and a hoodie that was covered in paint splotches, and that's how we went in and out of every single clinic.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it brings up memories too. One of my worst experiences was not a contract courier, was actually an employee that did this. Unfortunately, that had happened at all, but let alone an employee who, and I've seen many contract couriers, not to get sideline, but I've seen many contract couriers, if I've been outside walking, around the building or whatever, leave their vehicle running. And that was like scratching fingernails on a blackboard to me,
right,
for anyone to be leaving their vehicle running. Yeah. But one time we had a van, which typically if you're going to use a van in the courier business, you're carrying around a lot of something. In this case, a fair amount of specimens. Generally, if we assigned a van to someone, they were picking up at least 500 different requisitions or specimens. And they did not leave the van running. They stopped at a hospital to make a pickup, but they left their keys, the car keys, right there on the front of the dashboard. And guess what happened?
Sure.
It was stolen. It was taken, and the van he was towards the end of his route, and the van was just chock full of specimens. And that was a tough one to explain.
Did you ever recover the specimens?
Some of them. Were tossed on the side of the road. They were found all over the city, but the vast majority of them were never found.
Yeah.
And because of HIPAA, of course, and things like that, we had to contact every client, but we also had to contact every single patient that we could recover that we knew we had picked up. And fortunately, technology will help you with that, because most, at least with the 2 major labs, most of their specimens are collected by employees at patient service centers.
Yeah.
Well, that made it a little easier. Not that it was a good situation at all, but as far as contacting patients and things, it was a long ordeal and a HIPAA situation. So, people are people. I'm a strong believer in hiring the right people, whether they're independent contractors, whatever the relationship is. It starts with adding the right people to your team. And then what I used to always tell people that we would hire is you bring the heart with you to this job, wanting to do the right thing and being receptible to training. You bring that heart and that care, and we'll take care of the brain. In other words, training you how to be a courier, a top-notch courier, and making every decision with what's best for the patient in mind. Every decision you make on the road or in the office what's best for the patient at that particular time. Especially if things not going right, or you've got a question about something, it's very easy, as you know, to look at a good example probably is at a frozen specimen. Especially one maybe you picked up out of the lockbox, depending upon the type of container it was in. Yep. So you look at a specimen, a frozen specimen, and it's not quite frozen. So was it in the process of getting frozen, or is it in the process of thawing? You look at it; they both look pretty much the same.
Mm-hmm.
So what decision are you going to make at that point? You don't know if you should keep it frozen. You're trained sometimes to keep the specimen in the condition that you find it, which is critical, and that's correct.
Yep.
But sometimes there can be a little gray area. So do you ignore it and just keep traveling on and pretend that nobody ever notices it? Or do you bring it to someone's attention and ask for help? Asking for help is not a sign of weakness in this business. It's a sign of someone who cares.
So it wouldn't bother you to get that phone call from a courier that says, hey, I'm at a lockbox. It's got a frozen sticker on it. It's kind of slushy. Should I freeze it? What would your response be?
Yeah, I would tell them to freeze it.
Yeah.
Because most of the time you can freeze just about any type of specimen sometimes, and you're going to be okay, especially if it looks like it's already started the process of freezing or thawing. Yeah. Yep. So I would tell them to freeze it, after a little bit of dialogue there. But I would also keep it separate. And when you delivered it, bring it to someone's attention, saying, "Hey, this one looks kind of suspicious here. Here's what I did. It may or may not have ultimately been the right thing to do, but here's what I did upon guidance from someone." Because guess what? As you guys probably know, the instrumentation used in lab testing now is highly sophisticated. So a person looking at the specimen may not be able to tell necessarily if it's clotted or if it's, the plasma is not separated. They didn't centrifuge it long enough, whatever. A person looking at that may not be able to differentiate between all of that. But once you put it on those machines, they are going to reject it or accept it, because those machines are hypersensitive. They're like significant others. We can't get by with anything, right?
Yeah.
So that machinery, that multi-million-dollar equipment in the lab is going to sense something is wrong. They're going to say, "Hey, this has been hemolyzed. I don't know. I can't tell you where it was hemolyzed. I can't tell you that it doesn't have enough specimen or enough blood or whatever. I can't tell you where that happened. But I can tell you the instrument is talking to you. It's telling you, I'm not going to test this because you're not going to get an accurate result, and it's going to reject it."
So regarding that, honestly, how often when a specimen is hemolyzed and the machine rejects it, how often is the practice to look at the courier for that and say, clearly it should have happened during transport?
Yeah, I laugh because it's almost always the first place they look. They being whoever they is, the lab leadership or logistics leadership or whatever, they get a report saying, "Hey, this batch, came in last night from this client or whatever, and the machine rejected it. It's saying it was hemolyzed." Yeah. They almost always go to logistics first. Whether that's right, logistics has to be a part of that conversation, of course.
Yeah.
But when you ask who do they go to first, they almost always go to how was it transported first. Yeah. And then they'll go to how was it collected, whether it was a lab employee, a phlebotomist employee, or whether the client did their own collection. They will go to logistics first. How was it transported? How did you transport this? What condition was it when you picked it up? Then they'll go to the phlebotomist saying, how did you collect this? Did you keep it room temperature, frozen, whatever? How long was it in the lockbox? Was it in the right type of container? And if it's an irreplaceable specimen, that makes it even worse because, for obvious quality issues and patient care issues, the obvious issues there, but it's also going to trigger a much more strenuous internal investigation if it's a irreplaceable specimen. There's going to
Right.
be far more accounting and documentation required at every step of the process.
That can escalate. Absolutely. I asked that question because I knew the answer, and the importance of having well-trained couriers. That's what we're all about. That's what we do. And so, it's so important to use the right coolers. It's so important. By the way, I was going to say, you mentioned earlier about, a courier company that calls you repeatedly and says, I found a specimen in a lockbox, doesn't look right. Do you value that courier more than the courier company who doesn't say anything, brings a specimen and says, I don't know what happened?
Oh yeah, you've got to value the one that is going to self-report, saying, hey, I came across this, it looks wacky, or you called me to pick up this stat for patient Tim, but inside the box, there's not only patient Tim, there's 10 other specimens.
Right.
What do you want me to do? I much value those type of organizations that are going to contact you because there is no such thing as something too little or too big. And over a period of time, they'll either get accustomed to what's acceptable or not acceptable, or at the same time you're having scheduled meetings with them saying, here's what happened this month. This is the situation. What did we do? What should we have done? What do we do in the future? So you have fewer as time goes on. Hopefully, if the courier companies is consistent with their staffing, which is hopefully they are, over a period of time, those type of conversations become less and less because they already know the answer.
Yeah.
They either know what to do or they know who to call. And you've got to make all of that very clear in your relationship when you have your one-on-ones or your business reviews, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Weekly calls, status checks. Do I prefer who's on duty at the lab? Who should I call at what time? What day of the week do I call? Who do I call? During what times do I call? Because there's shift changes, of course. If all heck breaks loose and I can't get a hold of anybody, then who do I call? Is that Tim? Is it whoever? Specify all of that early. The earlier, the better. So that keeps down the surprises and, hey, I didn't know, or I didn't know I didn't think this was that big of a deal type stuff. Well, it's all a big deal. And much rather you call than all of us the next day trying to be in a position of explaining something.
Right. Communication and accountability. Specimen integrity is everything. I mean, and again, sometimes I feel like not enough scrutiny is on the couriers. I've seen some companies out there that are doing a lot of lab work, and I'm wondering who did the intake, who signed up with these, which leads me to my next question. It's kind of a cynical question, but so if a courier company calls to you and they're drastically cheaper than a good, reliable, honest, accountable courier company, but this company comes in and they're drastically cheaper, is that a deciding factor? Would that move you off of the one that may cost you a little more, but is really accountable and has done a great job?
No, never.
Never?
Never do I ever remember making a decision like that because the company was the cheapest. All things being equal, if they were as good at something as all the other companies, and there had to be a decision made about what's separating these companies from each other, if all's equal, then of course I'll look at the price.
Sure.
Because companies have budgets, they have P&Ls they have to explain, they've got buckets of expenses, contract courier expense, is in one bucket, employee expense and SWB, overtime, another bucket. So you've got financial people looking, very trained financial people looking at the variations of ups and downs on your P&L. And yes, price is important because it's important to certain people in the organization. But as far as the decision-making process goes on who to use, you better have a lot more going for you than just the cheapest guy in town. Because I've never made a decision just because you were the cheapest, because I know that if you are the cheapest, it's probably for a reason. You don't have the infrastructure in place, you don't have the problem resolution, And in today's world, not so much when I was starting out, but it's kind of been a journey. When you partner with a courier company, you're partnering with not somebody that can just get it from point A to point B and keeping the specimen integrity like you discussed. But you're also looking at like that set of different set of eyes you're talking about is where can I, as a courier company, save you money? What am I seeing that you're either not seeing or you haven't brought it to my attention yet? Like if I picked up 100 stats for you in a 24-hour period, when were most of those stats called in? Was it between 5 p.m. and midnight? What geography were they mostly called in? I'm looking for someone that can help me analyze all of this stuff. And right now we have to do that, before AI does it for us. AI will probably help with a lot of that. But right now, especially, you need people recognizing trends and partners that recognize that even when you don't recognize it. Because I used to tell people all the time with our customers, physicians and hospitals, the customer is not always right because they're just not.
That's refreshing to hear.
But they're always important.
Yeah.
And what they have to say is always important. But that doesn't make them right because they've got staff inside the office. Maybe they use the wrong type of container. Maybe they use the wrong type of a tube to put the blood in. They should, there's colors on those tubes for a reason. All those tubes have colors for a reason. And if someone puts the blood that they took out of your body and they put it in a green top when they should have put it in a yellow top, nothing good is going to come of that. So want somebody to help me figure all this stuff out, a partner that can look at trends, provide data, they say that have that old saying for a reason, let the data guide you. So want someone to help look at the data. It might hurt the courier company in the short term because you might lose some business out of it, but you're going to get that back multifold in the long term because that's one of the ways you solidify that relationship.
So I was just thinking of the example of a courier company that stops at the same stop for months upon months upon months and never gets a specimen. How do you feel about a courier company that just takes that stop, takes that money versus a courier company that says, hey, Tim, we've been stopping at Acme Clinic for months now and we've not got a single specimen out of them. How do you feel about a company that just takes the money versus a company that calls you and says, hey?
Yeah, very good question. I don't feel very good about them at all. And they might have different reasons for doing that from their perspective is, because the contract courier is probably going to get paid one way or the other, right? For the pickup. However, the customer is going to pay for a service they didn't really get or need. They didn't need that service. So I would expect those type of companies to self-report that on the upfront side, because eventually I'll figure it out. Because labs, any lab that's run by the logistics department or the courier department or distribution department, whatever they're called in their organization, and some operations that the courier department is ran by someone who also runs something else. Excuse me. So it'll oftentimes take a back seat. But if your logistics operation is run by logistics professionals, they're going to notice through a non-productive stop report and activity on our end, they're going to see that, hey, we're still going here through our own reviews and analysis. I'm going to be looking at how productive that client is, excuse me, especially if I'm sending a contract courier, which is costing additional fee, typically more than what you might be paying an employee, depending upon the route structure and the geography and all of that. So I'm going to keep paying this, and I'm going to look at the revenue of that client, how that client's revenue is either maintained itself, been consistent, or is showing a trend downward, but yet I'm over-servicing them. So if we're over-servicing somebody, I would expect our partners to be the ones that help us identify that situation.
Excellent. So you really value accountability, visibility. So it behooves a courier company, if they're making this stop and they're not getting any specimens out of it, just send an email, make a quick call. The fact that they're willing to take that temporary loss, think about it from a long-term perspective. If you have a courier company that is accountable on non-productive stops to you, you're going to be more fond of them in the long-term sense that, okay, this courier is going to self-audit. They're willing to lose a couple of dollars for a stop here and there. That shows me that they're paying attention and they care more about our long-term relationship than those short-term gains of charging you for a stop that they never get specimens from.
Right. Recon is absolutely vital and critical in this business, whether it's your own courier employee or a contract courier. You're looking for, and I'm expecting, feedback on recon for the non-productive stops like you're talking about, where you go to the lockbox and it's always empty, or I go to a professional building and there's like 20 lockboxes there, and you're thinking, well, there's 20 lockboxes here, but that have a particular lab logo on them, but I'm only picking up routinely from like 5 of those lockboxes. So what are those other lockboxes doing there? And what's the condition of them? They've got a brand name on them. So I'm looking to partner with somebody that can look at that lockbox and say, hey, it's dirty, dusty, won't open. If I'm having difficulty getting it open with a key, then the customer that's trying to put specimens in there is probably having the same problem. I need that type of feedback so that I can rectify the situation. On the fewer lock boxes that you need, that are required, the better, because the more lock boxes you have, then the more options you have of someone putting the specimen in the wrong lockbox.
Right. And then the courier doesn't check that and a specimen's left overnight. I remember early on in the day when I was a lab employee, we were encouraged, you talk about recon, we were encouraged to let our salesmen at the lab know if we saw, if the volume was decreasing, or we saw the other laboratory, their volume was increasing. And a lot of times it was optional. Back in the earlier days, it was optional for a clinic to go with a different lab. Is a lot of that directed by HMOs now, insurance driven, or do some of the clinics still have that autonomy to say, you know what, I don't like Quest anymore, or I don't like LabCorp, or I don't like ARUP, I'm going with Mayo?
Yeah, there's still a high degree of autonomy, still in the business. In the old days, you had a little bit less of that. Labs signed contracts with insurance companies, like Aetna or United Health, whoever, and they were pretty much binding to use certain labs. But during the course of time, now clients, physicians' offices, hospitals can pretty much use whoever they want to for lab work, is what I've seen it migrate to.
Interesting. Yeah. So it behooves laboratories to use well-dressed outsourced couriers, well-trained outsourced couriers. If the courier company you're using to pick up at certain clinics is employing drivers that don't have uniforms and their pants are dirty. I remember when I had my courier company here in Colorado and I was delivering a stat at night to the local hospital, and there was a courier in a vehicle in the courier spot. I walked by him and he was filling out a requisition. He was wearing a jumpsuit for the local trash company, hand to God. And he had this, cooler on this dashboard. And I thought, he's going to go into that hospital wearing this jumpsuit for the garbage company. Wow. And that's it, and it just blew my mind that anybody would think that that's okay.
Yeah, it's flabbergasting. Every time I hear stories like that, what I always tell people is, if you walk into an office, a building, even a building, just before you even get to the suites or the offices, people have to look at you and know if you're there on business to pick up specimens, to empty the garbage, like you said. I mean, if he was really there to empty the garbage, it'd be a different story, right?
Right.
Possibly. They have to know who you are and why you're there, just by looking at you.
Yeah.
Just by looking at you, you've got the logoed shirt or the branded shirt. You've got a some sort of lanyard with a picture ID. I would highly recommend picture IDs in today's world.
Yeah.
And a lanyard or some sort of easy to recognize. Hey, okay, there's the courier. They'll build a relationship. If you're the consistent courier, they're going to build a relationship with you because people are people, and you want to be friendly and polite and professional. But always suggest to people, I don't care how well you get to know them, because you're going to get to know them.
Yeah.
Is keep that part of it professional, get in and get out, and keep it professional. And they got to know why you're there. And because I've had so many down through the years, they'll walk in, I'll get a customer complaint saying, the guy walked in and he didn't know why he was here. He didn't know why he was here. He didn't know where to go. Now, not knowing where to go can be okay sometimes.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
Depending upon the facility, but not knowing why you're there, that's pretty mind-boggling.
That is so interesting. There is a uniform courier should wear. Yeah, like you said, a polo shirt with a company logo, a badge. Business casual if possible. I love the idea of couriers wearing some kind of khaki pants. I mean, what the outsourced couriers need to realize is you're an extension of the laboratory, whether you like it or not. I mean, I get the independent contractor status. Some people say, whatever, I'll do what I want. Well, maybe you're not going to be my courier then. If you send people that are improperly dressed, here's a great one. Some people get too clever and they say, well, you know what? I'm going to wear scrubs. I have a problem with medical couriers wearing scrubs. Tim, can you guess what it is?
I won't even guess, but I have a problem too with that. But I'd be interested to see what your reasoning is.
Well, I'm much more skeptical. I'm much more cynical. If a person's wearing a scrub and they go into a hospital, I'm either looking at them as oh, they're an employee of the hospital, or what are you here to do? Because someone wearing scrubs that was not a hospital employee, what are you trying to portray here? And what's your ulterior motive? Why are you wearing scrubs? Scrubs have a specific purpose. And I mean, wearing them in and out of, work areas, that's a whole nother topic. Yeah. But I just don't think it's appropriate for courier. I think it's a misrepresentation.
That makes sense. That's a very good explanation. You're pretending to be something you're not.
There it is.
For whatever reason. And in today's environment, we need to know especially in places of business, schools, things of that nature. We need to be able to recognize you, for who you really are, and not who you might be or might not be. And are you in disguise for some, ulterior motive?
I mean, that's a real risk. I mean, today we live in strange times and people do strange things. Mm-hmm. You talked about building relationship with lab techs. I have got stories, and I guess for the sake of time, I won't go there today, but I mean, there have been some extremely inappropriate interactions with lab techs that couriers think they have a relationship there with a capital R. They think they've got a new friend, maybe a new dating prospect. I mean, there's all sorts of things that happen. And, we've got to realize that is inappropriate. And there are ramifications to inappropriate behavior. And we're working on a course for that. But next question, I'm going to wrap it up. I promised you it would be around no more than an hour. I've got a couple of quick questions and then we'll wrap it up. Where do you see the lab industry headed? Because my assertion is that I haven't seen significant changes in even 20 years in the clinical lab industry as far as the courier department goes. I mean, there's tracking and visibility, there's temperature monitoring, but I mean, have you seen any major trends change, and what do you see maybe in the future?
Well, the easy, obvious answer, like you said, in the lab, when I started, everything was on the logistics side was manual. You wrote everything down.
Yep.
You wrote how many tubes you picked up. If you were lucky, you had someone, you or someone typed out a route sheet for you. Then we migrated to computers, and that was great. And then in the last 10 years or so, we migrated to scanners and things of that nature, and that they will still, like we were speaking about earlier, they'll keep fine-tuning the scanning part and the tracking and the GPS without the person actually holding the specimen doing much at all except delivering. Mm-hmm. But as far as the technology goes with the drones and self-driven vehicles, I see a little bit of that happening in the logistics lab business. But the risk of that, and what will probably happen, is if I think about it out loud, and that's what I'm doing right now, I'm just thinking out loud, is if you look at the skies in airplanes have lanes that they travel in. Ships on the ocean have lanes they travel in. Streets, vehicles have lanes they travel in. Of course, the self-driven vehicles will use those same lanes, but I can see what people will try to do, and Walmart's doing this. A lot of companies out there, I say a lot, but there's a fair amount of companies out there now using the drone thing, but they're using it from a proximity to the store or to the hospital, whatever. The drones are good for proximity. You're probably not going farther out than 5 miles max.
Mm-hmm.
Currently with drones, what will happen, and regulation will have to come in to factor into this, is you're going to become so congested and unregulated with drones because of airports and military installations and other sensitive facilities. I'd be hesitant to say that drones are taking over, although they will find their niche.
Sure. I think in a closed setting like a medical campus, I could see drones and their usefulness, but we see all sorts of videos on YouTube of people knocking over a pizza autonomous vehicle and stealing the food and things like that. People will jam the signal and drag a drone out of the sky. I mean, as technology changes, people learn how to adapt. People with nefarious motives will look at ways to take that down. When it comes to tissue samples and irreplaceables and even blood samples, that's a problem that we have to address. And so I would love to see how things are going in the future and where that ends up. I think I mentioned something to you earlier that I got really excited about. I'm going to nerd out with you for a minute here. For the last 2 years, we attended the ADLM conference in Chicago, and we had a booth there talking about training. And a gal came to my booth, and she had a lab specimen like this one, and there was a magnet attached to it, kind of a little device that was attached to it. And the idea of that was that magnet, that little device that attaches to the tube, can measure temperature changes, jostling, and geolocation. So now the idea is a laboratory, if you got a batch bag of specimens that you need to follow or track, you can put this tube in there, and then you can just kind of sign in and watch it and validate any major changes or diversions, or if it gets lost. I did an article a few years ago and interviewed several people from different lab industries, and one of the biggest things that they're still hoping for is some kind of nanotechnology that would attach to the specimen and track it from the point that it's drawn to the point where it goes into the machine. And we're not there yet, but it'll be interesting to see, where that ends up in the future, because, technology is great. And if it can help with faster turnaround times and less, we all know specimens are lost in the lab. Things roll off of counters and they disappear. It happens because it's the human element. Right.
And there's since you mentioned that, and I've got as much time as you do, but I know you're probably on a schedule, but
plenty of time.
When you're talking about lost specimens in particular, the lab is going to say what the lab is going to say, and logistics is going to say what we're going to say. And the better that you can show tracking the last touch point of where something rested, where did it dwell, how long did it dwell there, then you're going to come to a happier conclusion, not just for who wins the argument of whose fault it was, although I don't like to put it that way, but at some point in time you have to understand where the disconnect was, where the defect was, so you can create a solution to it to keep it from happening again.
Right.
And in logistics, so that tube that Accutainer there you just shown is totally amazing to identify and be able to tell what happened to that specimen before it got anywhere near the instrument, because we know once it gets on the instrument's going to be able to tell, hey, I don't know what happened, but I'm not doing this, like we said earlier. It won't be able to tell you, but the tube with that type of technology, may be able to tell you that I don't know what you did with this, but it feels like it went through a tornado, or it's been hot, it's been cold, it's been this or that, and that's not going to work. So if you can identify those, because they're not going to fire up those instruments just for anything. They need a batch. They need a certain amount of specimens before, unless it's a stat, to put it on those instruments. So if you can keep anything from incurring a cost in operations, if you can identify it sooner than later, then so much the better.
Yeah, it can't be stated too many times how important the logistics industry is in delivering patient care. We have a tagline, delivering excellent patient care. We talk about it all the time when we train, because if you just show up and kind of toss the specimen around and you may be delivering patient care, but it might not be excellent. The outcome is not the desired outcome. We never talk in the courier industry about Six Sigma, but we in the lab industry, it was drilled into our heads all the time. So how can we encourage outsourced couriers to strive for Six Sigma, where we're talking, 0.99999%, accuracy? Unfortunately, there's so many people coming into the industry with their own background and their own reason for being there and their own motivations. And some are more conscientious than others. Some are there just for the money. Some are truly there because they had a relative that had a health scare and they really want to have a positive impact. And so why they get into it is important. Again, our phones are ringing right now. Our CSR is taking several calls all day long from people looking to get into the industry. And he's so passionate about making sure that, the right people get into the industry, but it's almost out of our control. All we can do at Integrity is give them thorough training based on our experience in the lab industry. Here's what the lab is looking for. Here's what they require of you. If you do these things, you have a better chance of success and providing excellent patient care. But there's millions of people coming into the industry that are not taking our training, that are getting free programs or just winging it. And
that's too bad. You've got those type of operations who are winging it, and maybe they've got for whatever reason, they are lucky enough at that point in time to get enough revenue coming in to where that satisfies whatever lifestyle they're living at that time. But that's not going to last. Yeah, it won't last in this industry. That will catch up with them. I like the idea, not just because you do it or your company does it, but because I think it's the right thing to do. Is that the training certifications? I really like that idea in the medical logistics business, because in the lab, they don't do anything in there, or they're not going to allow just anybody to do anything unless they've gone to school to be a medical technologist, or they're certified in running that type of machine, whether it's Abbott, Olympus, whatever it might be. You've got to be vetted and certified to run that instrument. So I like that premise. Of course, it'll be different with a logistics twist to it, because you can't afford to pay couriers necessarily what you're paying people that went to college to be lab techs necessarily. Right. Although with technology changing, I see that changing too eventually, because things become more robotic and technical, where the human factor is not quite as important. I see in the future probably some changes with the certifications inside the lab, but with the couriers, create your own certification process, either by using yours, which I think is pretty good, or work with your clients, especially your larger clients. If you're doing business with the larger labs or hospitals, create a certification process that's unique between you and them. So your couriers that service them, that deliver specimens to them or pick up specimens from them or whatever it might be, you've got a checklist, and not just anybody can go service that particular client. You've got a checklist, and they've been certified to service that hospital or that lab. Is that required? No, I just think it's a really super thing to do. And it's a nice differentiator if you've got 50 courier companies out there that they're looking at. I would rather do business with somebody that's got a certification process, regardless of whether they have to do it for regulatory measures or not. They're doing it because it's the right thing to do for patient care. And then on top of that, they've got a certification process just to walk inside my building. I mean, I think that it doesn't get much neater than that.
Right. One of the things that we've encountered is that there's several sources for certification. You have American Red Cross that has a bloodborne pathogen program. You have the CPR Foundation that has a certification program. You have Pro Bloodborne. You have all these institutions or companies, but I've found that they're an awareness program. So what they do is they make you aware that there's bloodborne pathogens in the workplace. I remember an insurance company, I will not name them, but they're nationally known, and they have a bloodborne pathogens packet that they send out to their companies. And it basically says, if somebody bleeds in the workplace, run, don't touch them, be careful, beware. There's pathogens in the workplace. I've never trained in 22 years on fear. I don't think fear is a good trainer, but I think that function specific training, that's what we hammer that home here, because our training is based on our experience in the laboratory, having owned a couple medical courier companies. So we've developed a manual that brings together industry best practices in the clinic, in your car, at the lab, based on also OSHA regulations. And so when couriers go through our course, they're literally going to learn what the specimen is all about, the patient circle of service, and then they're going to learn about how these regulations and definitions and all of it apply to their job. But then we're going to show them what to do when they're in the clinic picking up, in their vehicle, how to secure the cooler, what kind of coolers to use, how to behave at the laboratory. Okay. And so we walk them right through the whole process. We created the course because of our lab background, because we know that there's thousands of couriers out there servicing the lab industry, and many of them are just taking those awareness courses that don't fill in the gaps. We want to connect the dots for the couriers so that there's no guessing as to what to do. Now, obviously, Quest differs from LabCorp, differs from Mayo, differs from ARUP. There are different, protocol or daily, how they package it. Mayo has these color codes for every specimen. They also have a video that they send out. But again, it's basic best practices in understanding specimen integrity and specimen handling and transport. That's what we do. And we do it because of our background. We do it because we want to make sure that, take away the guesswork. That's what the Medical Courier Connection does. It provides trained, vetted couriers to the lab industry. That's why we're going to COLA in May, the COLA conference in Tennessee. That's why we go to ADLM, to get in the periphery of the lab decision makers and say, hey, there are choices out here, guys, and you can make choices of companies that are vetted by us, trained and vetted by us. And so it all comes down to patient care. The statistics of injury and or ruined specimens are kind of buried within the lab statistics generally, but I believe that couriers that are properly trained, we can lessen pre-analytical errors, and we can lessen injury to patients based on having better trained couriers.
Yeah, I totally agree. Your mission is on top of everything you said, which is totally spot on. Is what I've always said is, whoever you're delivering it to, whether it's a person or a spot or whatever, you need to make that process work the way it's designed. And the person that most of the time you might be delivering to a person or picking up from a person, are you making there, aside from the patient care aspect that you spoke about, which is the most important, but aside from that, if you're deciding who to do business with, is the person picking up or delivering from my lab tech or my person in the building, are you making their job harder, or are you making their job easier by the way you deliver?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. So, all right, I'm gonna turn on a dime here and throw in a little surprise. I noticed on your LinkedIn profile, you mentioned Nicholas Sparks. You want to talk about that for a second?
Oh yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. Now I'm a avid reader, but usually I read my entire life. I've been drawn to biographies and history, those type of books, and I still read those, occasionally, or as I have time, I read those type of books. But somehow or another, a couple of years ago or so, at least, my wife and I, we go to movies. We like to go to movies when that's possible, and generally we're drawn to light comedy, romance, drama, that type of thing. And somewhere down the line, we saw a Nicholas Sparks movie, who he's had many of his books turned into movies, and I can't remember the name of it. But somehow or another along the line, I bought one of his books, even though that typically wasn't my type of book to buy. Right. And because his books are almost always involve some sort of romance, but they're not that syrupy, sugar-coated type of romance novel that you might be familiar with. Mm-hmm. I bought the book, and my wife asked me to read it to her, to read out loud.
Wow.
So I started with the Nicholas Sparks book, and we liked that book very much, I can't remember the name, because I think we've read like 15 out loud. I've read 15 Nicholas Sparks books.
Okay, what's your favorite?
I don't really have a favorite. I think they were all good in their own way. The last one we read, and I'm trying to remember the name of it right now, was a few months ago, because he doesn't have a new one out right now, but he released a new one in October of last year, and it has to do with the supernatural.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of off kilter for him. Typically his books involve, some history of a person and how they meet another person, and the good stuff, the bad stuff that can happen in life. But this one involved a ghost that he became, the key character in the book became acquainted with, and he's the only one that could see the ghost, which in ghost stories is not all that unusual. So it was the last one. It was released in October, and I just can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But we have not read another one out loud by Nicholas Sparks, because we basically have read all of them. 15 or so, and he's written more books, but we've scratched a couple, 2 or 3 off the list because we'd seen the movies. So
right.
We didn't want to read the book after when we'd already seen the movie. Now we're reading a book now. I'm reading it out loud. It's slow going right now. And I'm trying to remember, it's an author, I think her name is Laura Gilmore, that I picked up out of the bookstore because my wife said, hey, you need to find another book.
Yeah.
So I leafed through probably hundreds of books at Barnes and Nobles and such, trying to find the type of book that was somewhat similar to Nicholas Sparks' type of book. And we're reading through this one right now, so we're about halfway through it. But what I've found, like I said on LinkedIn, what I have found, it keeps me engaged. It keeps maybe the dementia and the Alzheimer's, maybe keeps my brain occupied by reading aloud.
Yeah.
And if I were a younger person in my getting started in leadership, or a salesperson, something that involved talking with other people or leading other people or selling to other people, a pleasant surprise I have found reading aloud is expanded my vocabulary, because the writers sometimes they'll use words you're looking at that like, I can understand the context of this word, but I have not a clue what it means. So you'll look it up there, and I'll Google it and say, oh, okay. So it increases your vocabulary. It helps with the tone of your voice, the accentuation, pitching your voice differently at different times. It's just a real nice way to develop your speaking skills, particularly if you're younger in your career. Reading aloud. I also like to do that. I would also recommend that when you're driving around by yourself in the vehicle, singing, and perhaps singing to singers that you may not typically like, but where you understand the words, and not like a hard rock. I'm nothing against all these groups, but they're very difficult to sing to if you're talking about heavy metal and things like that. I would sing to a song that has a melody and has different pitches in the song, where the singer is raising their voice, lowering their voice, accentuating a point. I would strongly recommend singing also to develop your speaking style for groups or for even one-on-ones.
That's compelling. I know that if I'm singing driving down the road, I get strange looks, but some people are great singers. Others maybe not so much. I kept thinking when you were talking about reading out loud with your wife, happy wife, happy life. And then readers are leaders.
Yeah.
So for the young couriers that are coming up, or the young people coming up, I mean, readers are leaders. Read, learn, expand, grow. We're never too old to do that. And so it's a discipline. But,
yeah, I totally agree. You're right. I didn't even think about that. Leaders are readers. I've always tell people, especially younger people, wanting to be promoted and whatever, is when you go into a group meeting, you never know who you're going to be speaking to, the president of the company or whoever.
That's right.
So be well versed, be well read, like you say. Well versed, read magazines in the doctor's offices or wherever, or I'll Google them even like they do now. Things that you wouldn't typically read, like Newsweek or Time Magazine or the news services, CNN, whatever, regardless of your political beliefs.
Right.
Look at the other side of the question of the situation, so you can carry on a conversation with just about anybody. Like sports, if you're not a sports fan, at least Google's ESPN, see who's playing in the Super Bowl or basketball or NCAA, whatever it might be. Not that you truly enjoy it that much, but you know just enough to where you can kind of talk about it and have some sort of short elevator type discussion.
That's it.
Somebody, how about them Cowboys, or how about them Rams, or whatever, and not just be able to talk, to care. And that conversation that might start out as a sports conversation or a weather conversation, who knows what that might lead to, because you never know. You never necessarily know who you're speaking to.
Yeah, that's really good. I have a sales tips class that I'm teaching tomorrow night, and we talk about having your elevator speech, knowing what your why is. So bringing it back to the courier issue, you might be in an elevator in a medical building, and you got the purchasing manager right next to you. You notice his badge. Can you describe why they should use your couriers in 30 seconds or less? Because he's going to be at his stop coming up. Can you do it? If you have a passion and you know what your why is, and you know why you're in the industry, it'll be easy. I can do my elevator speech in 30 seconds every time.
Yeah.
Not a question.
Yeah. The why. I like the why. What's your purpose? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on logistics, medical courier work, and the clinical lab industry?
No, my only advice, technology is bringing us, like you gave the example earlier, it's taken us places. There's plenty of space, I think, for the right people to be in the business, be not afraid to embrace technology, because if you are afraid of it, someone else is not. And be in the business for the right reasons, not just to make a quick dollar. Although that, obviously you want to make a living, you want to make more money, all of that, we all do. But, have that passion that we spoke about earlier, have that passion. What's your reason? What's your real reason for going into this line of work? Do you think you can just add another courier company out there and you'll make some sort of living? That's probably not the right reason. You don't have to be a saint, and you don't have to have all sorts of ulterior motives or life experiences. But if you don't sincerely believe on patient care or the idea that being a courier in the medical field is part of healthcare, if you don't buy into that at some level, I'm not saying you've got to be some sort of guru about it or holier than thou. But if you don't buy into that synopsis that medical couriers are part of healthcare, then you're going to have a very rough road to hoe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tim Leggett, thank you so much for your time today. We sure appreciate it. This has been amazing, and I look forward. Maybe we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, anytime. I love it. I love talking logistics. And then logistics leads to other type discussions.
Sure.
Sharing experiences. And on every conversation, I always learn something. And I learned something from this call today. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tim. Sure appreciate it. Chris, any final thoughts?
So for those of you watching on YouTube, there's an 82% chance that you're not subscribed. So go ahead and drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell for notifications if you want to get notified for any future episodes. If you want to listen to the podcast audio, Oh, sorry. You can listen on Apple Podcasts, the Podbean app, Spotify, Amazon Music and Audible, iHeartRadio, Player FM, and Podchaser.
Wow.
And
Here, I
shout
thought
out
you were
to-
gonna-
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
I thought you were
Yeah.
going to talk about Nicholas Sparks, Chris. Come on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I haven't read any of his books in a couple of years now. But when I was younger, we would go see all the movies, and we read a couple. I know Nights in Rodanthe, The Notebook, maybe The Last Song.
Yep.
Maybe that was one with Miley
Last Song,
Cyrus. Yeah.
Well, go ahead
yeah,
and
no, I love
and pick it up. He's worth reading. It's not. He's very articulate, and it's not too sappy.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid of it.
Oh, absolutely. No, definitely.
This
I'll
is
get
coming
that
from
for
a
some of our
Navy.
travel.
This is coming from a Navy man who has possibly killed people. So I'm impressed.
I was, yeah. You should be. I was stationed with the Marines my entire time in the Navy. I was never on a ship.
Mm-hmm.
I was always with, as part of my field medical training, I was always stationed with the Marine Corps, 3rd Marine Division, Okinawa, Pendleton, Parris Island, all of that. So, back then I would not been caught dead with a Nicholas Sparks.
Right. You'd have to fight your way out. That's right.
Yeah. Good
Tim,
stuff.
thanks again, my friend. I sure appreciate it. We'll do more in the future.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.
That was a great interview. Tim, thanks again. We look forward to having you on in the future. Let's go ahead and thank our sponsors.
Yeah, thank you to Key Software System and to Risk Strategies.
Excellent. Yeah, no, we're looking for new sponsors as well. We're talking with some possible other companies to come on board, but yeah, we love our sponsors. Thank you guys for supporting the MCC. And we're going to be doing a lot more stuff in the future. All right,
you.
Chris, take us home.
Hey everybody, Ken with Integrity Medical Courier Training here.
And this is what's happening, right? So with such a serious subject, but he's able to inject humor. So it's in our best interest to invest not only in safety, but give some of those dividends back to the drivers.
I'm like, how do you start this medical carrier stuff? And nobody had a mentorship. Nobody told me what industry events to go through.
I was thinking I need a name for my first conference. And it just dawned on me, use the name that they keep calling me. And I was like, yeah, the Boss Maker Conference.
You're learning so many important things, and I'm so proud of you.
Yeah, that sounds a bit expensive. I think I'll just train them myself. After all, this isn't rocket science.
And we have liftoff of